The bridge of the horizon's edge hummed quietly as Captain Jake Morrison reviewed the latest reports. Outside the large windows, stars stretched into thin lines as the ship moved through hyperspace. Everything seemed peaceful, but Jake knew better. The galaxy was changing, and not for the better. "Captain, you need to see this," Lieutenant Amy Crawford said from her station. Her voice carried a weight that made Jake look up immediately. He walked over to her console and leaned down to read the transmission. It was another intercept, the third one this week. The Zathran Dominion was moving ships again, this time closer to human territory than ever before. Their massive warships were parking themselves just outside the boundaries set by the Treaty of Proxima, the agreement that had kept peace for nearly 70 years. "How many ships?" Jake asked. "At least 15 that we can detect, but there could be more hiding in the nebula fields." Amy pulled up a star map that showed red dots clustered near the border. "They're not even trying to hide anymore." Jake felt his jaw tighten. For 3 generations, humanity had stayed quiet. After the wars that nearly destroyed Earth, the government had decided isolation was the answer. Let the other species handle galactic politics. Let them fight over trade routes and territory. Earth would focus on rebuilding, on healing the wounds of conflict that had left cities in ruins and billions dead. The Treaty of Proxima had made it official. Earth would maintain its current borders and stay out of galactic affairs. In return, other species would leave human space alone. It had worked mostly. Earth had prospered in its isolation. Cities were rebuilt. Technology advanced in secret. The military trained constantly, but for a war no one expected to fight. But isolation had created a problem no one had anticipated. The galaxy had forgotten what humanity was capable of. The younger generations of alien species had grown up hearing stories about the fierce humans who once fought across the stars. But they were just stories. Ancient history. The Council of United Worlds treated Earth like a sleeping giant that would never wake. The Zathran Dominion treated them like cowards. "Have there been any responses from the Council?" Jake asked. Amy shook her head. "Just the usual diplomatic protests. Strongly worded letters. The Zathran don't even bother to reply anymore." Jake returned to his command chair and pulled up more reports. The situation was worse than he thought. Over the past 6 months, the Zathran had been expanding aggressively into neutral territories. Small colonies went silent. Trade ships disappeared. When anyone asked questions, the Zathran claimed the areas had always belonged to them. The worst part was that no one stopped them. The Council talked and talked but never acted. The other species were too comfortable, too used to peace. They thought words and treaties could solve everything. Back on Earth, deep beneath the ancient city of Geneva, Admiral Helen Price stared at the same reports in the command center. The room was vast and filled with holographic displays showing every corner of human space. Hundreds of officers worked at stations, monitoring communications, tracking ships, analyzing threats. Helen had been in the military for 40 years. She remembered the old wars, the desperate battles that had pushed humanity to the edge of extinction. She had been a young lieutenant then, watching friends die as alien warships tore through human defenses. The Treaty of Proxima had saved Earth, but Helen had never forgotten the cost of appearing weak. "They think we're afraid," Commander George Hall said, standing beside her. He was younger than Helen, but he understood the situation perfectly. "The Zathran believe we hide behind our borders because we can't defend them." "Let them think that," Helen said quietly. "For now." George looked at her carefully. "You believe we'll have to respond eventually?" It wasn't a question. Helen nodded slowly. "The Zathran are testing us. Every day they push a little further, take a little more. They're waiting to see what we'll do. If we do nothing, they'll keep pushing until they cross into human space. And if we do respond, then the galaxy learns that our silence was a choice, not a necessity." Helen pulled up a new report and her expression darkened. 3 human surveyor ships had gone missing 2 weeks ago. They were civilian vessels, sent to map a region of space near the border. Scientists, engineers, and their families. 247 people total. The last transmission placed them in an area the Zathran now claimed as their own. Helen sent the report to the Unified Defense Council immediately. This wasn't about border disputes anymore. This was about human lives. The emergency session began within hours. President Linda Hayes called together the most powerful leaders on Earth, the men and women who made decisions that affected billions. They gathered in a secure room with no windows, surrounded by guards and technology that prevented any spying. "We have to assume the worst," Helen told them, her voice steady despite the anger burning inside her. The surveyor ships crossed into what the Zathran consider their territory. They were taken. "We don't know that for certain," one council member argued. "They could have experienced mechanical failure. They could be lost in a nebula field. 3 ships at the same time, in perfect working order?" Helen shook her head. "The Zathran have them. The question is what we do about it." President Hayes was quiet for a long moment. She had been elected on a platform of maintaining peace, of continuing the isolation policy that had served Earth so well, but she had also sworn to protect human citizens no matter where they were. "What are you suggesting, Admiral?" "Send a message to the Zathran. Demand they return our people. Give them 48 hours to comply. And if they refuse?" Helen's eyes were cold. "Then we remind them why Earth stayed quiet all these years. Not because we were afraid, because we were being kind." The debate lasted for hours. Some council members wanted more diplomacy. Others wanted to send a rescue mission immediately. A few argued that 247 people weren't worth risking a war that could kill millions. Helen listened to all of it with growing frustration. She had spent 40 years preparing for this moment, training soldiers and building ships for a war she hoped would never come. But hope wasn't strategy. Hope didn't save lives. Finally, President Hayes called for a vote. The room fell silent as each council member made their choice. When it was done, the decision was made by a narrow margin. Earth would respond. Within an hour, encrypted orders went out to every military installation in human space. Bases on Mars, Europa, and Titan began powering up systems that hadn't been fully active in decades. Ships that had been maintained in perfect condition but never used for combat started moving into formation. On military stations throughout the solar system, soldiers who had trained their entire lives for a war they thought would never happen received their orders. Some were scared. Others were eager. All of them understood the weight of what was coming. The message was sent to the Zathran Dominion through official channels. It was brief and clear. Return all human personnel within 48 hours. Cease all violations of treaty space, or face the consequences. The Zathran response came 12 hours later. It was a single word, translated into human language. No, Admiral Helen Price read the message and allowed herself a small, cold smile. She turned to Commander George Hall and gave the order she had been preparing to give for decades. Activate the Armada. It's time to show them what humanity has become. The war room beneath Geneva filled with holographic images as Admiral Helen Price briefed the Unified Defense Council. 3-dimensional projections showed the Zathran border, marked with red indicators where their ships patrolled. Blue markers showed human vessels, most of them still in dock or in reserve status. "We found the surveyor ships," Helen said, her voice flat and emotionless. She pulled up new images that made several council members gasp. The 3 ships floated in space like broken toys. Their hulls were torn open, cargo holds emptied. Life support systems had been deliberately disabled. There were no escape pods, no survivors. They were stripped for parts and resources, Commander George Hall explained. The Zathran took everything of value and left the rest to drift. President Linda Hayes stared at the images, her face pale. "The crews?" "We found evidence of 170 people in Zathran labor camps. The rest are presumed dead." Helen pulled up additional data. The camps are on 3 different worlds, all deep in Zathran territory. The conditions are brutal. Minimal food, no medical care. They're being worked to death. The room erupted in angry voices. Council members shouted over each other, demanding action. Some called for immediate military strikes. Others warned about starting a war that could spread across the galaxy. Helen waited for the noise to die down before continuing. "We have prepared 3 response options. The first is diplomatic pressure through the Council of United Worlds. We present our evidence and demand sanctions against the Zathran. That will take months," one council member said. "Our people don't have months." Agreed. The second option is a covert rescue operation. Small teams insert into Zathran space, extract our people, and leave before they can respond. President Hayes leaned forward. "What are the chances of success?" 40% at best. The camps are heavily guarded. Even if we extract everyone, we'd lose most of our rescue teams, and it does nothing to prevent this from happening again. And the third option? Helen's expression hardened. We send a message the Zathran can't ignore. We deploy military force, destroy their border installations, and take our people back by force. Then we make it clear that any future violations of human space will result in overwhelming retaliation. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what she was really proposing. After 70 years of peace, Earth would go to war again. "This is insane," one of the older council members said. "We'd be starting a conflict that could spread across the entire galaxy. Other species would get involved. Millions could die. Millions will die anyway if we do nothing," Helen shot back. "The Zathran won't stop with us. They're testing everyone's resolve. If humanity backs down, every other weak species becomes a target. Is that what you want? To hide while the galaxy burns?" Commander Paul Dixon stepped forward. He was younger than Helen, but his record was impressive. 3 tours in deep space, multiple commendations for tactical excellence. He had spent the last decade preparing human forces for exactly this scenario. "If I may, Mr. President," Paul said respectfully, "the Admiral is right about the strategic situation. The Zathran believe we're weak because we've been silent. They think Earth hides because we can't fight. A limited strike would correct that misconception while minimizing the risk of wider conflict." "Limited how?" President Hayes asked. "We target only military installations in the border region. We extract our people and disable Zathran ability to project force in that sector. We don't push into their core territory. We don't target civilians. We make it clear this is a rescue operation and a warning, not an invasion." Helen pulled up tactical projections. "We can have a task force in position within 36 hours. The operation itself would take less than a day. We go in, hit them hard enough to shock them, and extract before they can organize a proper response." The debate went on for hours. Some council members argued for more time, for more attempts at diplomacy. Others pointed out that time was a luxury their captured citizens didn't have. Images of the labor camps played on repeat, showing humans working in terrible conditions while Zathran guards watched. One image in particular swayed many votes. It showed a young girl no more than 8 years old, sitting in the corner of a camp barracks. She was thin and dirty, her clothes torn. Her eyes stared at nothing, empty of hope. President Hayes stared at that image for a long time. She had children of her own, grandchildren. She tried to imagine them in a place like that, tried to imagine doing nothing while they suffered. "How many ships would we deploy?" she asked quietly. 300 vessels, Helen said. 10% of our total fleet capacity. The number shocked everyone. Most species believed Earth had 50 capital ships at most, aging vessels left over from the old wars. 300 ships meant human military strength had been vastly underestimated. "Where did these ships come from?" one council member demanded. "We've been building them," Commander George Hall said simply. "For 70 years, while the galaxy thought we were hiding, we were preparing. Every generation trained. Every year we built more ships, developed better technology. The Treaty of Proxima kept us out of galactic affairs, but it didn't prevent us from defending ourselves, or from preparing for the day we'd need to remind everyone why they signed that treaty in the first place," Helen added. The vote was called. Each council member entered their decision privately, their choice visible only to the president. When the results came through, President Hayes sat back in her chair and closed her eyes briefly. The motion passed. Earth would deploy military force to rescue its citizens and punish the Zathran for their violation of treaty space. "May God have mercy on us all," the president said quietly. Orders went out immediately. On Mars Station 7, Lieutenant Kevin Brooks watched as the massive hangar doors opened to reveal ships he had only seen in training simulations. The carrier Vengeance moved slowly out of dock, its hull gleaming under the station lights. Behind it came cruisers, destroyers, and frigates, each one a masterpiece of human engineering. Kevin had been born after the Treaty of Proxima. He had grown up in an era of peace, studying history texts that talked about war like it was ancient history. Now he watched that history come alive in front of him. "All personnel to battle stations," the announcement echoed through the station. "This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." Soldiers ran through corridors with practiced efficiency. Pilots climbed into fighters that had been maintained perfectly, but never used in real combat. Engineers performed final checks on weapon systems that could destroy entire cities. In the crew quarters, Kevin sat on his bunk and looked at a photo of his family back on Earth. His parents had fought in the border skirmishes before the treaty. They had told him stories about fear and chaos, about watching friends die in explosions that turned ships into clouds of debris. He had never really understood those stories until now. On the Defiance, Admiral Helen Price walked through the corridors of her flagship. The massive dreadnought was the largest ship humanity had ever built, 3 kilometers long and armed with enough firepower to level a continent. It had been constructed in secret in the asteroid belt, its existence known only to the highest levels of government. Now the galaxy would see it. Helen entered the bridge and looked at the main display. It showed the formation of ships gathering around Earth, a fleet that would have terrified her younger self. 300 vessels, all crewed by volunteers who understood they might not come home. "All ships report ready, Admiral," Commander George Hall said. Helen nodded slowly. She thought about the young girl in the labor camp, about all the humans suffering in Zathran captivity. She thought about the message Earth was about to send, not just to the Zathran, but to every species that had forgotten what humanity was capable of. "Take us to hyperspace," she ordered. "It's time to bring our people home." The Armada jumped, and the galaxy would never be the same. The medical ships arrived 3 days after the rescue. Dr. Lisa Grant walked through the corridors of the hospital vessel, checking on patients who were slowly recovering from their time in the labor camps. Most suffered from malnutrition and exhaustion. Some had injuries that had never been properly treated. A few would carry the scars forever. Lisa stopped at one bed where a young girl sat, the same one from the photographs that had convinced the council to act. Her name was Emma, and she was 9 years old. Her parents had been scientists on one of the surveyor ships. "How are you feeling today, Emma?" Lisa asked gently. The girl looked up with eyes that seemed too old for her face. "When can I go home?" "Soon. Another week, maybe 2. We want to make sure you're healthy first." "My parents didn't make it, did they?" Emma's voice was flat, emotionless. Lisa sat down beside the bed. She had reviewed Emma's file. Her parents had died in the first week of captivity, killed when they tried to resist. Emma had survived alone in the camps for 7 months. "No, sweetheart." "I'm sorry." Emma nodded slowly. "I knew. I just hoped maybe I was wrong." She paused. "The guards said nobody would come for us. They said Earth didn't care about people like us. People who left Earth's protection. They were wrong," Lisa said firmly. "Earth came. We'll always come." Back on Earth, the evidence from the rescue operation was being compiled into a comprehensive report. Admiral Helen Price personally oversaw the documentation, making sure every detail was recorded. The conditions in the camps, the treatment of prisoners, the bodies of those who hadn't survived. She sent the complete report to the Council of United Worlds, knowing it would be discussed in their next session. But she also released it to every major news network in the galaxy. Within hours, images of human suffering in Zathran camps flooded the media. The reaction was immediate and fierce. Most species in the galaxy claimed to follow ethical standards about treatment of prisoners. The evidence from the camps showed the Zathran had violated every single one. Even species that had been sympathetic to Zathran expansion turned against them. The Council of United Worlds called an emergency session. President Linda Hayes attended personally, something Earth's leader hadn't done in 40 years. She sat in the chamber where representatives from hundreds of species gathered to discuss galactic affairs. The Zathran ambassador tried to control the narrative. He was a skilled diplomat, trained to turn any situation to his advantage. He stood before the council and spoke passionately about sovereignty and territorial rights. "The humans violated our space," he declared. "They attacked without provocation. This is an act of war, and we demand the council condemn this aggression." President Hayes waited for him to finish before rising. She was smaller than most of the aliens in the chamber, but her presence filled the room. "The Zathran ambassador speaks of violations," she said calmly. "Let me show you what violation really looks like." The chamber's screens lit up with images from the camps. Humans working in brutal conditions. Children separated from their parents. Bodies in mass graves. The council members, even those who had seen war and suffering, looked away from some of the images. "These are civilians," Linda continued, "scientists and their families. They were captured while conducting peaceful research in neutral space. They were enslaved, tortured, and killed, and when we asked for their return, the Zathran refused." The Zathran ambassador's scales turned pale. "Those images are fabricated. Human propaganda designed to justify their aggression. Are they? Linda asked. She pulled up another file. These are medical scans from the survivors. Broken bones that healed poorly, scars from beatings, malnutrition. Should I continue? The chamber fell silent. The evidence was overwhelming. Even the Zathran's allies couldn't defend what had happened. But Linda wasn't finished. The Council needs to understand something. For 70 years, Earth stayed quiet. We accepted isolation because we wanted peace. We believed the treaty system would protect everyone, including us. We were wrong. She looked around the chamber, making eye contact with representatives from dozens of species. The Zathran thought our silence meant weakness. They thought they could take our people and face no consequences. They were wrong, too. Earth responded with military force because diplomacy failed. Because words and protests and committee meetings don't save lives. So what does Earth want? The council speaker asked. Revenge? No, we want change. Linda pulled up new documents. Earth is formally requesting a permanent seat on the Security Council with veto power over military actions. We want the treaty system reformed to include automatic military responses to violations. We want monitoring of aggressive species and consequences that actually matter. The chamber erupted in debate. Some species supported Earth's demands. Others worried about giving humanity too much power. A few argued that Earth was trying to take over the Council. You think we want control? Linda asked. We had it once. Do you know what happened? We nearly destroyed ourselves fighting over it. Earth learned the cost of empire. We don't want to rule the galaxy. We just want to make sure what happened to our people never happens to anyone else. The debate continued for days. Meanwhile, human forces consolidated their position in the border regions. Additional battle groups arrived, establishing a permanent presence. The Zathran tried to protest, but their objections rang hollow after the evidence of their crimes. On the Zathran homeworld, their government faced its own crisis. The Supreme Commander who had ordered the initial provocations was executed in the traditional way, torn apart by competing claimants to his position. The new leadership reached out to Earth immediately, offering negotiations. Admiral Helen Price received them on the Defiance, deliberately making them come to her. The Zathran delegation was led by General Krath, a veteran warrior who had fought in dozens of battles. You humiliated us, Krath said bluntly. Destroyed our ships, invaded our territory, took what you wanted and left us looking weak. Yes, Helen agreed. That was the point. Krath's scales shifted through several colors, surprise dominant among them. You admit it? Of course. You needed to understand that attacking humanity has consequences. Real consequences, not diplomatic protests that you can ignore. Helen pulled up a display. But I'm not interested in continuing this war. Earth wants peace. We've always wanted peace. We just need you to understand the terms. What terms? First, all assets stolen from human ships will be returned or compensated. Second, you will accept human monitoring stations at your major military installations. Third, you will sign a formal treaty guaranteeing the rights and safety of any humans in your territory. Fourth, you will pay reparations to the families of those who died in your camps. Krath was quiet for a long moment. Those are harsh terms. Yes, they're meant to be. Helen leaned forward. But here's what you get in return. Earth will help you rebuild your fleet. We'll share defensive technology. We'll support your legitimate territorial claims. And if anyone else tries what we did to you, we'll help you stop them. Why would you do that? Because strength respects strength. You're warriors. We're warriors. You made a mistake thinking we were weak. We corrected that mistake. Now we can move forward as equals, or we can continue this conflict until one of us is destroyed. Your choice. Krath considered this carefully. In his culture, there was honor in accepting defeat from a worthy opponent. Earth had proven worthy. More than that, they were offering a way forward that didn't require endless conflict. I will take your terms to my government, he said finally. The agreement was signed 3 weeks later. The Zathran accepted all of Earth's demands and received the promised support in return. Other species watched this development with interest. Earth had defeated an enemy and then turned them into an ally. It was a display of power, yes, but also wisdom. Captain Jake Morrison, back on patrol in the horizon's edge, watched as the first human monitoring station was established above a Zathran military base. The Zathran had objected at first, but eventually accepted it as part of the price of their mistake. Do you think it will last? Lieutenant Amy Crawford asked. The peace? Jake considered the question. I think the Zathran understand now that attacking humanity is a bad idea. Whether others learn that lesson without testing it themselves, that's the real question. He was right to wonder. Across the galaxy, intelligence agencies frantically reassessed everything they thought they knew about human military capability. 300 ships had been deployed. How many more did Earth have in reserve? What other technology had they developed in secret? The answer to those questions would reshape galactic politics for generations. The Zathran border outpost detected them first. Operator Kresh had been monitoring the sensors for 6 hours, bored out of his mind. Nothing ever happened on this shift. A few trade ships, maybe a patrol or two. The humans never came this far from their space. They were afraid. Then his screen lit up with contacts. Dozens of them. Hundreds, Commander. Kresh said, his voice cracking slightly. We have multiple hyperspace signatures. Very large. Coming in fast, Commander Voth walked over lazily. Probably another false alarm. The sensors picked up ghost signals all the time in this region. He looked at the screen and froze. 312 contacts, all of them reading as capital ships. That's impossible, Voth whispered. The humans don't have that many ships, but the sensors didn't lie. As he watched, the contacts resolved into clear images. Massive carriers, each one launching small craft by the dozens. Dreadnoughts that made their own ships look like toys. Cruisers and destroyers in perfect formation, moving with precision that spoke of endless training. Sound the alert, Voth ordered, his scales turning pale. Get me high command. Now. The human armada came out of hyperspace in perfect formation, a wall of steel and fire that stretched across the void. At the center, the Defiance hung like a dark star, its weapons already powered and ready. Admiral Helen Price stood on the bridge, watching the tactical display with satisfaction. Every ship was exactly where it needed to be. Every captain knew their role. This was what 70 years of preparation looked like. Zathran ships are powering weapons, Commander George Hall reported. 17 vessels total. They're forming a defensive line. Let them, Helen said calmly. Open a channel. The main screen flickered to show a Zathran commander. He was tall and reptilian, his scales shifting from green to red as anger and alarm fought for dominance. Behind him, his bridge crew worked frantically. Human vessels, you are in violation of Dominion space, the Zathran commander said, trying to sound authoritative. Withdraw immediately or be destroyed. Helen smiled coldly. I am Fleet Admiral Helen Price of the Earth Defense Force. You are currently holding 170 human citizens in labor camps. You will release them immediately and surrender all personnel responsible for their capture. You have 5 minutes to comply. The Zathran commander's scales flared bright red. You dare make demands? You dare threaten the Dominion? We will crush you like the insects you are. You will learn your place in this galaxy. We already know our place, Helen replied quietly. Do you know yours? She closed the channel and turned to her crew. All ships, weapons free. Let's teach them why Earth stayed quiet all these years. The Zathran fired first, launching missiles and energy beams across the void. It was an impressive display, the kind of firepower that had conquered dozens of worlds. Against most enemies, it would have been devastating. Against humans, it was barely an inconvenience. The human point defense systems activated, computer-controlled weapons tracking every incoming missile with perfect accuracy. Lasers carved through the void, destroying targets faster than the eye could follow. The few missiles that got through splashed harmlessly against shields that had been refined for decades. Then humanity returned fire. The railguns spoke first. Accelerating tungsten rods to a fraction of light speed, the projectiles crossed the distance in seconds, slamming into Zathran shields with the force of small nuclear weapons. 2 Zathran cruisers vanished in explosions that lit up the void. Target their flagship, Helen ordered. The Defiance's main gun charged, drawing power from the ship's massive reactors. The weapon was Helen's favorite, a magnetic accelerator that could punch through a moon. She had named it the Peacemaker, because that's what it brought. The Peacemaker fired. The Zathran flagship's shields held for almost 2 seconds before shattering like glass. The projectile continued through, tearing the ship in half. Secondary explosions rippled along both pieces as they tumbled through space. 11 enemy ships remaining, George reported. They're trying to retreat. Let the frigates pursue. Everyone else begin landing operations. Get our people out of those camps. Throughout the battle group, transport ships moved forward under heavy escort. Marine companies prepared for combat, checking weapons and armor one final time. Lieutenant Kevin Brooks was among them, his hands sweating inside his gloves despite the environmental controls. "First time?" the sergeant next to him asked. Her name was Lisa Grant, a veteran with 20 years of service. "That obvious?" Kevin replied. "You're not throwing up, so you're doing better than I did on my first drop." Lisa checked her rifle. "Remember your training. Stay with your team. Follow orders. We're going to get our people and get out. Simple." Kevin nodded, though nothing about this felt simple. He had trained for combat drops dozens of times, but those were simulations. This was real. People would try to kill him. He might have to kill them first. The transport shook as it entered atmosphere. Outside, the Zathran labor camp grew larger. It was surrounded by walls and guard towers, weapons emplacements visible at regular intervals. Intelligence said 200 Zathran soldiers guarded the facility. That seemed like a lot until Kevin remembered he was part of an assault force 5,000 strong. The humans weren't taking chances. 30 seconds, the pilot announced. Lisa stood up and everyone else followed. "Listen up. The Zathran think they can take our people. They think we're weak. Let's show them what happens when you mess with humanity. For Earth! For Earth!" The response echoed through the transport. The doors opened and Kevin jumped, his boots hitting the ground hard. Around him, thousands of Marines did the same, spreading out in precise formations. The Zathran guards opened fire, but their weapons were no match for human armor. Kevin raised his rifle and fired, the weapon kicking against his shoulder. A Zathran guard fell, then another. His training took over, muscle memory guiding his actions. Move, shoot, advance. Cover your teammates. Take the objective. The battle for the camp lasted less than 20 minutes. The Zathran defenders were brave but overwhelmed. Human forces moved like a machine, each unit supporting the others. When the guards tried to group for a counterattack, artillery from orbit simply erased them. Kevin found the prisoners in barracks that stank of sweat and fear. They were thin and dirty, wearing rags that had once been civilian clothes. Some could barely stand. Others wept when they saw human soldiers. "We're taking you home," Kevin told them. "All of you." An older man grabbed his arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "We thought you weren't coming. We thought Earth had forgotten us." "Earth never forgets its people," Kevin said firmly. "Never." Similar scenes played out at the other two camps. Human forces landed, eliminated resistance, and extracted prisoners with brutal efficiency. The few Zathran who tried to fight back were crushed. Those who surrendered were documented and left alive. In orbit, the space battle had ended. 14 Zathran ships were destroyed. 3 had escaped to carry word of the defeat back to their government. None of the human vessels had been seriously damaged. Admiral Helen Price reviewed the casualty reports with satisfaction. 12 humans killed, 37 wounded. All of them would be honored, their sacrifice remembered. But it was a tiny price compared to what could have been lost. "All prisoners secured," Commander George Hall reported. "We're ready to jump back to Earth." Helen shook her head. "Not yet. I want monitoring stations built at every major Zathran military installation. Permanent facilities staffed by our people. If the Zathran sneeze wrong, I want to know about it. That's going to make them angry." "Good. Let them be angry. Anger is better than contempt." Helen pulled up the communication system again. "Send a message to the Zathran High Command. Tell them we are willing to discuss terms for withdrawal of our forces, but those terms will include reparations, monitoring, and guarantees that this never happens again. And if they refuse..." Helen looked at the holographic display showing the destroyed Zathran ships, the captured camps, the rescued humans heading home. "Then we remind them that this was us being restrained. They really don't want to see what happens when we're not." The message went out, and across the galaxy, species began recalculating everything they thought they knew about humanity. Earth had been silent for 70 years. Everyone assumed that meant they were weak, afraid, or no longer relevant. The Armada proved them all wrong. Humanity wasn't hiding. They were waiting, and now everyone knew the truth. 6 months after the Armada's deployment, the galaxy had settled into a new normal. Human ships patrolled trade routes that had once been plagued by pirates. The pirates had learned quickly that attacking vessels under human protection was a fatal mistake. Several pirate bases had been reduced to debris fields, their wreckage left as warnings to others. Commander Paul Dixon stood on the bridge of the Guardian, his new command. The heavy cruiser was part of the frontier fleet, a permanent force stationed at the edges of human space. His orders were simple in theory but complex in practice. Protect human interests, assist allies, ensure that the lesson of the Zathran incident was not forgotten. "Sir, we're receiving a distress call from the Meridian colony," his communications officer reported. "They're reporting Kresh raiders in the system." Paul studied the tactical display. The Kresh were a species of scavengers and opportunists, not particularly dangerous individually but deadly in large groups. They had been testing the borders of several species' territories, looking for easy targets. "How many ships?" "At least 20, maybe more." Paul smiled coldly. "Set course for Meridian, maximum speed, and send a message to the Kresh fleet. Tell them they have one chance to leave before we arrive." The Guardian jumped to hyperspace, followed by the rest of Paul's squadron. They arrived at Meridian 15 minutes later to find the Kresh ship still in orbit, still threatening the colony. "They didn't leave," the tactical officer said unnecessarily. "Their mistake," Paul replied. "All ships, engage. Make it quick." The battle lasted 4 minutes. The Kresh ships were fast and maneuverable, but they lacked the firepower to challenge human warships. The Guardians' weapons tore through their formations, destroying ships with precision strikes. The few Kresh vessels that tried to fight back found their weapons couldn't penetrate human shields. When half their fleet was gone, the Kresh fled. Paul let them go. Dead enemies couldn't spread warnings. Defeated enemies told everyone what happened when you threatened human interests. "Send a message to Kresh leadership," Paul ordered. "Tell them their ships violated treaty space and attacked a colony under human protection. Tell them if it happens again, we won't stop at their fleet. We'll find their home bases and eliminate them." The message was delivered. The Kresh, who had spent decades raiding weaker species with impunity, suddenly found themselves on the defensive. Other pirate groups watched and learned. Human space was off limits. Human allies were off limits. Violate those rules and face overwhelming force. Back on Earth, Lieutenant Amy Crawford received her promotion to captain. Admiral Helen Price, personally, pinned the rank insignia to her uniform in a ceremony attended by hundreds of officers. "You've earned this," Helen said quietly. "And now you get to put it to use. You're taking command of the Vigilance." Amy had studied the Vigilance's specifications. It was one of the new heavy cruisers, built with all the latest technology. Fast, powerful, and equipped with weapons that could engage multiple targets simultaneously. "What's my assignment?" "There's a disputed region near the Talaran border. 3 species are arguing about who has rights to the resources there. It's getting heated. Your job is to make sure none of them decide to test human colony worlds while they're busy fighting each other." Amy understood immediately. Earth wasn't claiming the disputed territory, but they were making sure their neighbors understood the boundaries. "How aggressive should I be?" Helen smiled. "Use your judgment. But remember, we don't start fights. We just make absolutely sure we finish them." The Vigilance deployed a week later, taking up position in the disputed region. The 3 species involved in the argument were surprised to see human ships. They sent diplomatic protests, asking what Earth's interest was. Captain Amy Crawford sent a simple response. Earth had no interest in their dispute, but several human colony worlds were nearby, and Earth would not tolerate any spillover from their conflict. If fighting got too close to human space, she would eliminate the threat. All of them. The 3 species looked at recent history, looked at what happened to the Zathran and the Kresh pirates, and decided maybe this wasn't the right time for conflict after all. Negotiations resumed. On Mars, Lieutenant Kevin Brooks watched the next generation of ships under construction. The shipyards had expanded massively, building not just warships, but explorers, colony ships, and trade vessels. Earth was no longer content to sit behind its borders. Humanity was spreading into the galaxy with confidence. Kevin had been promoted after the rescue operation, given a desk job coordinating logistics. He missed being in the field but understood his role was important. Every ship needed supplies. Every soldier needed equipment. His work made sure they had what they needed. "Impressive, isn't it?" a voice said behind him. Kevin turned to see Admiral Helen Price, who somehow still found time to visit regular installations despite her increased responsibilities. Yes, ma'am. I never imagined we had this kind of capability. Most people didn't. That was intentional. Helen looked out at the construction yards. For 70 years, we built in secret. We prepared for a war we hoped would never come. Now that it has, we're making sure everyone knows we're ready. Do you think there will be more fighting? Helen was quiet for a moment. Yes. Not tomorrow. Maybe not next year. But eventually someone will test us again. Some species will think the Zathran were just unlucky. They'll believe they can succeed where others failed. And we'll have to teach them the same lesson. That seems exhausting. It is. But it's better than the alternative. When we hid, when we stayed silent, people thought we were weak. They took our citizens, killed our people. Now they know better. Fear is temporary, but respect can last generations. The Council of United Worlds had undergone significant reforms. Earth now held a permanent seat on the Security Council with veto power. President Linda Hayes used that power sparingly but effectively, blocking actions that would lead to unnecessary conflict while supporting genuine security measures. Other species grumbled about human influence but couldn't deny the results. Piracy was down. Border conflicts decreased. The aggressive expansion that had threatened to destabilize the galaxy slowed as species realized humanity would respond to violations of treaty space. The Zathran, humbled by their defeat, became unlikely partners. Their warriors trained alongside human soldiers, learning new tactics and sharing their own expertise. General Krath led joint operations against pirates and raiders, his forces working smoothly with human commanders. I never thought I would fight beside humans, Krath admitted to Commander Paul Dixon during one operation. I thought you were weak, cowards hiding behind your borders. And now I understand. You weren't hiding. You were choosing not to fight. There's a difference. A warrior who chooses peace is stronger than one who fights because they know nothing else. Paul nodded. My admiral likes to say we're not warriors because we're good at fighting. We're warriors because we're good at winning, and sometimes winning means not fighting at all. Captain Jake Morrison continued his exploration missions, but with a very different reception than before. The Horizon's Edge pushed into unknown space, mapping new systems and making contact with isolated species. When they arrived, they were treated with respect bordering on fear. They're afraid of us, Lieutenant Amy Crawford observed during one mission, before her promotion. Even species that have never met humans know what we did to the Zathran. Fear fades, Jake replied. We need to give them something more lasting. Show them humanity isn't just about military power. We explore, we trade, we help species that need it. Fear gets attention, but respect keeps it. He was right. As time passed, human ships became known for more than just their weapons. They responded to distress calls regardless of species. They helped establish trade routes. They shared technology with allies. Slowly, the galaxy's perception of humanity evolved from fear to respect, to something approaching admiration. On Earth, in the command center beneath Geneva, Admiral Helen Price reviewed reports from across human space. Ships on patrol, colonies expanding, trade increasing. The military remained on alert, but the constant tension of the post-isolation period had eased. We did it, Commander George Hall said, reading over her shoulder. We showed them we could fight, and now they're letting us build in peace. For now, Helen replied, but we can't get comfortable. The moment we stop being vigilant is the moment someone will test us again. You think we'll be fighting forever? Helen considered the question carefully. I think we'll always need to be ready to fight. But maybe, if we're smart and strong and consistent, we won't have to fight as often. Maybe eventually the galaxy will understand that attacking humanity or our allies is pointless. That we'll always respond, always defend our people, always finish what others start. She pulled up a file on her screen. It was a report on Emma, the young girl from the labor camps. She had been adopted by a family on Earth and was slowly recovering from her trauma. She attended school now, played with other children, smiled sometimes. That's why we do this, Helen said quietly. So children like her can grow up safe. So no one ever has to wonder if Earth will come for them. We will. always. The galaxy had learned its lesson. They had thought Earth would stay away, content in isolation.